Welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Maciej Wilowski. I'm joined here at the EEC Trends Conference in Warsaw with Marek Woszczyk, the CEO of Polskie Elektrownie Jądrowe, which is Polish for the Polish Nuclear Power Plants Group. Marek, pleasure to have you here.
Likewise, thank you very much.
So, Mr. Woszczyk, we see that Poland will be getting its first nuclear power plant officially in 2036. Now, we'll have to wait a decade for that, which could be quite a long time, of course. And construction is set to begin in 2028. But if we look at the construction site, then the planning stage is already in many ways in progress. Cool. How is the situation looking like on the ground? And have there been any delays? Is everything going according to schedule?
Thank you very much for this question, very important one. I think that many things can be said in order to describe the current status of a project. But, just from the high-level perspective, I think that we are on time, on schedule with the project. As for the time being, obviously this is a complex one. But we are just, actively managing all the risks that may pop up on the way. Last year, I think we achieved a milestone when the European Commission granted us the so-called, their decision regarding the so-called state aid in the form of bidirectional contract for difference, and which means basically that we are fully bankable and, the project can be financed. Why I called it a milestone? Because from the beginning of December, this was the date when the Commission issued their decision, positive. And the decision, by the way, confirmed all the, let's say, key elements which we applied for. So the Commission's decision let the world know that we are, first of all, very committed, that, as I said, the project is bankable, and the project is, on time, let's say. And before we got this decision from the European Commission, we sounded the financial market when it comes to the overall debt financing, because, a year ago the Polish Parliament granted us the equity part of our financial structure, reaching out to $15 billion, roughly speaking. But the remaining $35 billion should come from the financing world, in principle from the Export Credit Agency, including US Exim Bank on the front. Mm-hmm. And last couple of weeks, I was in Washington when we signed the very first agreement with US Exim Bank. The financing agreement, so-called, the engineering multiplier program, which is the first of the series of the agreements which we are going to sign with the ECAs. The next hopefully will follow in the coming months. The debt coming from the ECAs, Export Credit Agency, should cover, I think, the majority of the debt financing. 60%, 60 to 70%. The remaining part, 30%, should come from the regular financial commercial world. And we have already got, based on the market sounding results, we already got more than we need. The oversubscription is of a magnitude 5 to 6 times more compared to what we expected. So it is a very good symptom for, let's say, our project.
Now, will these funds pulled together be enough to cover the full cost of the project? Because we see the components of a nuclear power plant with the reactors, very sophisticated equipment, obviously. Right. Is there any possibility of a cost overrun potentially?
There's always such a risk. I wouldn't say call it possibility, but risk. But the key element of, let's say, building a nuclear power plants, and this is a lesson learned for us as a company, for which this is a very first of the kind project. So we base on the lessons learned from the other projects in the world, including the AP1000 applications, both in the United States, Vogtle project, and in China. That we see clearly that, the risk management and overall management of the project is a key. Any mistakes, any gaps here, will be very, very costly in the future. So that's why we want to, let's say, foresee and plan for any, let's say, gaps in order, let's say, to avoid any pitfalls in the future. So, but you're right, yeah, that's there is also, let's say, such a risk, but the issue, let's say, that we foresee the risks and we mitigate the risk upfront.
So we see that many countries in the region, not just Poland, are increasingly betting on and investing in nuclear energy.
Yep.
We see the construction in Hungary on their second nuclear power plant in cooperation with Rosatom. the Russian firm. In Slovakia, we have a deal signed with the U.S. pledging new investments in nuclear energy. Now, in all these examples, the initiators of these projects cite cost reduction for consumers as one of the primary benefits. How do you foresee this nuclear power plant reducing energy costs for millions, potentially, of Polish consumers?
That's our strategic aspiration, let's say, to deliver the nuclear power plant that produces the electricity for the entire Polish and our, let's say, neighbors' economy at a competitive price. Absolutely. That's why we pursue, let's say, three strategic objectives to deliver this power plant on time, in budget, and on top of it, with the maximum participation of the local businesses, local Polish businesses. And even today, if I compare the estimates regarding the future electricity price from the NPP1, which I'm responsible for, with the offshore contracts for difference, wind offshore farms, today we are more competitive. So I'm, let's say, very positive and optimist when it comes to, let's say, the future outcome of the NPP1.
And how could nuclear energy factor into Poland's future energy mix, not only ensuring Poland's energy transformation when it comes to clean energy and green energy, but also securing Poland's energy security and independence? How do you see nuclear playing into that?
Our plant of a capacity almost 4 gigawatts will be responsible for, say, 1/10, 1/9 of the overall capacity installed in the Polish electricity system. When it comes to the energy, I mean commodity, this should be 1/7, 1/8, so quite a big chunk, if I may say so, right, of their production, and so we will, let's say, provide that quite significant part of, let's say, the demand for the Polish businesses and individuals as well. I think this is the, just, rely on the statements from the government. This is the first nuclear power plant in Poland, but not the last one. At least the Polish government aims at building another one of more or less the same capacity. Perhaps the PEJ, the company I am CEO of, is going to be to some degree responsible for it, but this is up to the government to decide. This decision should take place in the coming years. For now, we have a strong focus and commitment on delivering, as I said, NPP1 on time and in budget. I think this is overall rebirth of the nuclear energy and nuclear industry in Europe. This is quite, let's say, logic result of the climate policy pursued by Europe for years. So far, Europe had a strong focus on the so-called green energies and renewable technologies. Nuclear power plants is not green, but it's clean, right? It does not emit anything. Or substantially nothing, basically, and the emissions are absolutely negligible. Plus, has this advantage over the renewables that is stable, right? There's a stable, predictable, non-intermittent, non-dependent on any weather conditions. And when it comes to, when you take into consideration, let's say, the sources of the nuclear fuel available worldwide, so this is also the source of the so-called independent power and energy, which is quite important for Poland, bearing in mind its geopolitical situation and geographical, let's say, location, bearing especially in mind the current circumstances that surrounds us.
So when people think of nuclear energy, I think a lot of people don't consider like a green form of energy in the way they think of wind and solar, for instance. What do you think could be done to change that perception of nuclear energy?
We have to understand that there's no competition between, let's say, the wind, solar energies, generally speaking, this, weather-dependent energies, and the nuclear energy. I think these two technologies have its own place in the energy mix, and they should be regarded as complementary, right? So they are like, filling their respective places in the energy mix, and not, being direct competition to each other. Absolutely not. I think they're absolutely necessary parts, as I said. Solar, wind, to some degree hydro as well. They are intermittent technologies, weather dependent mostly, which is not a feature, definitely is not a feature of the nuclear energy. This is a stable and especially long running. We are building an NPP not for a decade or two, but let's say 6, 7, maybe 8, maybe even for a century. So that's very clear advantage.
One final question, since we're running a little bit short on time. How do you think Polish public perception on nuclear power has changed over the decades? Because we saw in the 1980s there were plans to construct a nuclear plant in Żarnowiec. But that unfortunately never came into fruition because of Chernobyl. Then you had a public protest against nuclear energy, lack of funding at the time as well. So how has public opinion on the matter evolved?
Yeah, very good question. Every year as an investor, we measure, let's say, this public opinion on NPP1 in Choczewo, and say we benefit from quite high, let's say, support on the general country scale. This is more than 90% year by year, so it's not changing. Locally, obviously, we have, let's say, the lower support, but for the obvious reasons, right? We are going to change dramatically, but in a positive way eventually, the way of life of the people that are, let's say, out there in the nearby the location of our NPP1. But even on site, the support exceeds 50, reaches 60% right now. I think that, issue might be not even a problem, but challenge was that, especially locally, closer to the site, on Pomerania region, people had a tendency, which I fully understand, not to believe that this NPP1 will happen eventually. Now they know that once we got this European Commission support for our investment, we have a fully bankable investment. Plus, we've chosen AP1000 technology, which represents the nuclear reactors of 3+. And say segment, which is very safe, the safest available large-scale nuclear technology these days. So we, explain to the people that this is a safe, secure, and will change their local life, and in terms of the local economies, right, as well, will augment, will increase their, let's say, the social life, their, let's say, economies, etc., etc., in a positive way. So their support is growing. That's what we, let's say, absolutely respect and do everything we should as an active and responsible investor, in order, let's say, to help people understand and benefit from our very large investment.
Marek Woszczyk of Polskie Elektrownie Jądrowe, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Maciej Wilowski reporting from the EEC Trends Conference here in Warsaw. Stay tuned for more on TVP World. Take care.